Participating online, Dr. Faison,
And Mr. Van Osdol is not on yet.
I'm on as well. Good morning.
Good morning.
and he's here now. Yeah,
Morning.
these two members participating remotely.
Okay, let's begin the meeting with a moment of reflection. Please bow your head. Thank you. Our safety briefing, Haley Brunel.
Good morning. Thank you, Chair Baker and members of the board. My name is Bailey Brunel. I'm the Director of Facilities and Fleet Services, and my team is responsible for the life cycle support of all of JEA's facilities, vehicles, and equipment. Before we have our safety moment, let's take a minute to recall that in the event of emergency, to make sure to call 911 and alert others. If the emergency requires an evacuation, we'll use the stairwell, not the elevator. And for those in the T19 meeting area, the designated assembly location will be at the First Baptist Church parking lot located at the corner of Ashley and Main Street. Make sure to pair up with your safety partner, which will be the person to your right. And as always, be cognizant for the potential of trip hazards on your way out. Lastly, remember to keep your cell phones on silent and your laptops on mute when not actively speaking during today's board meeting. Today's safety topic will focus on sleep and sleep deprivation. Sleep is a fundamental aspect of our physical and mental health, and getting adequate sleep is important to maintain proper hormone levels that help us function. Not getting an adequate amount of sleep can result in fatigue, increase our chances for a safety incident, increase our risk of stroke, and decreases our cognitive ability to focus and regulate our emotions and moods. While almost 30% of Americans suffer from sleep deprivation, there are some tips from the American Academy of Sleep Medicine that we can all follow to help us sleep better and longer. For example, cutting down on caffeine consumption, maintaining a healthy diet, and doing your best to relax as you wind down at night. And remember, a good night's sleep helps us all begin our day with focus we need to stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I have a question.
Sir.
If everybody's partner is the one to their right, how do you all not bunch together?
We'll ask Bailey to come back maybe next month and explain.
Okay.
It's
Pin this on Bailey.
no. Yeah, it's
I'm gonna abandon Rick. Go to Regina. Regina's gonna abandon.
Never mind. I've
we will.
lost control of the meeting.
I can assure you that next month there'll be a next meeting. We have till January 11th. There will be a different set of instructions on how to get out of
First
it.
one to the door. That's the key.
I'm
Like the general's attitude.
Following the general.
I'm particularly concerned that you are not wanting to be take care of the person to your right. Thank you.
To be taken care of.
I got you.
Okay. Are there any introductions that need to be made?
I don't think so. I think we are good.
Okay, you have an agenda before you. Can we get a motion to? Motion? Second. Discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Next, we have our consent agenda, which consists of the board meeting minutes of October 26th. Can we get a motion to approve them?
Moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, I don't see Councilmember Boylan.
He is not going to be here today.
Okay, nor online.
That's correct.
Okay. Are there any comments from the public, Regina or Landon?
I'm not aware of any online comments, and I don't believe there's anyone in the galley here for comments, public comment.
We do have one person that is wants to speak that is virtual. That we thought was going to be here, but he's going to be virtual.
Okay. Who is it?
So, Chairperson,
Landon,
I
Eric.
can go ahead and go through the. I do
Yes.
see Eric here. We can go ahead and allow for the time for public comments virtually.
And Landon, why don't you go ahead and go through the instructions and then we'll recognize Eric Geller as the person that has signed up with us to speak.
Okay. Once again, my name is Landon, and for those that are new to the WebEx technology, I'm going to give a brief overview of the controls for public comment. Now, if you're joining us via the desktop interface or a smart device, such as a smartphone or tablet, you may move around your screen and see a series of buttons at the bottom. Now, the very first one that you may notice looks like an icon of a microphone. Now, if it is red, it means you are muted and will be on mute for the majority of the meeting unless recognized to speak. Now, if you are recognized to speak or asked to provide comment, you will click on that button and it will turn green. This will mean that you're unmuted and people can hear you. I do ask that you use this option to mute your line when you're not speaking. This will allow me to reduce the amount of background noise in today's meeting. Now, located on the right side of your screen, you will find an icon that looks like a person labeled participants. This option will allow you to see a long list of individuals who have joined today's meeting. At the very top, your name will be visible, and to the right, you will notice a gray icon that looks like a hand. Now, if you click it, it will turn blue, letting me know you'd like to be recognized for comment. Now, those that may have dialed in directly, now there's two additional ways you can be recognized for public comment. The first is by pressing *3 on your telephone. This will raise your hand virtually, which will then allow you to press *6 to unmute your line. Now, when you do unmute your line, please state your first and last name so everyone may hear who is speaking before you provide the comments. Now, alternatively, we have also opened up the comment section. So if you're unable to be heard through the audio channel, you may also be able to type your comments via chat, which is located to the right of the participants label. Now, I will like to go ahead and recognize Eric Geller. You have your hand raised, and you can go ahead and proceed with public comments. Thank you.
Yes, good morning. My name is Eric Geller. I am the founder of jackspublicinternet.org, a local non-profit. jackspublicinternet.org, or JPI, is a non-incorporated group of Jacksonville citizens engaged with the future of JEA fiber and municipal broadband in Jacksonville. It is both timely and important that JEA is discussing its project for municipal broadband as a new business opportunity in today's board meeting. Timely because of the historic $1.2 trillion in bipartisan infrastructure funding that was signed into law yesterday, and that impacts all aspects of JEA's portfolio. Historic, or rather important, because public utilities such as JEA exist to provide the set of services that are essential to everyday life: water, sewer, electric, and internet. The early days of the electricity market look a lot like what we have today with the internet. We survived that painful market transition, and today our economies thrive with the standard of electric service delivery by public utilities. That same story is unwinding now for internet service delivery by public utilities. Look closely at the example of Chattanooga, Tennessee, and their public utility, Chattanooga EPB. A recent economic analysis showed Chattanooga's municipal broadband has delivered $2.7 billion of economic impact in the past decade. But be prepared for the existing multi-million-dollar influence campaign from incumbents AT&T, Comcast, and others. It'll be brought to bear on Jacksonville and Tallahassee, seeking to prevent JEA from meaningful entry into this market. These monopoly incumbents will fight you hard, and in ways that will not always be visible to the public. But we at Jack's Public Internet are convinced this JEA board, the current JEA leadership, and the professional staff at JEA possess the integrity, business acumen, and practitioner capabilities necessary to weather that storm. Godspeed to all of you in this journey to bring municipal broadband to Jacksonville. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Very thoughtful and helpful comments. We appreciate you joining us.
Appreciate that, Chair Baker.
Okay, we'll turn now, if there are no other public comments. Landon?
There are none.
Okay, Jay, can you give us your managing director report?
Can, and thank you very much, and good morning to the board members, to those that are in the room and watching, and to the employees that are watching the board meeting too. I hesitate to say this because sometimes I get in the middle of my report and I change what I'm going to say, but I'm going to try to keep it brief this morning. Since we are going to spend the most of the day talking about the strategic direction, I'll have a little bit more to say as we jump into that part of the meeting. It is special time for me to be at 1 year. We're 2 weeks away from being here for one full year, and every day I'm excited and proud to be part of this team. This unbeatable team is committed to the mission, building community, improving lives, and they are working on that every day. I want to thank the board for your service and your time and the participation that you have as you help guide us through the next several years of our strategic direction. So I thank you for letting me be a part of this team. I do think it's appropriate for us to recognize and celebrate team members and accomplishments. November 10th, JEA hosted a Veterans Day celebration honoring staff who have either served or are actively serving in the military. It's the 100th anniversary of the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. That was the theme nationally, and we used that theme as well. I want to thank the committee that worked to put on what was a meaningful celebration and event to honor our veterans. We were honored to have General DeSalvo to provide kind of stories, and we expected it to be really good. It was even better than we expected because of the personal stories that he shared, encouraging veterans to share their stories so that the next generation will understand, to be proud of what they have done in their careers. So thank you for that. We currently have nearly 20% of our workforce, 366 people that are veterans. And they are a vital part of our workforce. They bring life experience and skills learned in some of the most stressful circumstances that translate well to the utility business. So thank you to all the veterans. It's also appropriate for us to recognize Jody Brooks, who you all know, but those of you that know her will not be surprised that she was recently invited to join the membership of the Jacksonville Women's Network. It's an organization that supports and accelerates the advancement of women both in personal and professional endeavors. So congratulations to Jody on this well-deserved honor, and thank you for the ways that you continue to contribute to us. In early November, on November 3rd, the Florida Municipal Electric Association recognized JEA with the Building Strong Communities Award. It's an award that recognizes us for making valuable investments to enhance the quality of life of our community, which is our mission. It recognizes utilities for leading community-focused programs that go beyond the efficient delivery of affordable, reliable, and clean energy. So thank you to over 2,000 JEA employees that make awards like this possible. It's not the awards that we're going for. That's just a sign of the good work that people are doing. Quick reminder that today's meeting is a little bit different than normal. We'll do what is the more normal business at the first, and then step into our strategic discussions. Remembering a couple of things from my perspective, my take on strategy is that it's an ongoing effort. It rarely fails at the development stage. It gets harder in the execution portion. So we have a team that will keep us focused on strategy. We're not creating a book, but it's more of a set of principles, guidelines, and objectives that will allow us to make the right decisions moving forward. It did occur to me this morning that we had planned on having the strategic direction overview session in March of last year. And I said, whoa, that's a little early. I've only been here for about 3 months. Somehow I felt comfortable with the idea of letting at least 3 of our leadership team members who have been here less than that amount of time to give the presentations and discuss the strategic direction today. The point is that this is still a relatively new leadership team. We are coming together quickly. The strategic discussion really is meant to be a discussion, an overview of what is going on. We are not going to go slide by slide. We are going to have the discussion, and hopefully you all will have that input. The first part of that strategic discussion will be Ken Scheibel and Mike Mace, that are managing directors of PFM Asset Management. PFM Financial Advisors have been our financial advisor for a number of years. Really pleased that they are here to help join us, to help understand, and they're virtually joining us, but to help us understand the outside view, how the economy that is beyond our control affects us, and what types of decisions do we need to be thinking about and making as a utility to support the community. And lastly, now that I have missed every single one of your birthdays through the first year, I want to recognize that as we come to the end of the calendar year, both General DeSalvo and Rick Morales have birthdays in December between now and the next time we meet. So happy birthday to you all. And because we don't meet again until January, I want to encourage everyone to have a happy and safe holiday season, which might be the earliest I've ever wished people a happy and safe holiday season. So thank you very much for allowing me to be part of this great team and what we do every day. And with that, I will turn it back over to you. And if you have questions, we can cover them now, or we can move on.
Thanks, Jay. Questions? Okay, keep thinking about who's to your right.
Yes, sir. I've noticed who's to my right.
Don't give a darn. Trouble now.
Can we have the monthly performance update? Christopher Jackson, please.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Chair Baker, members of the board. My name is Chris Jackson. I am the Director of Customer Revenue Services here at JEA, and I'm responsible for a team of 50 great employees who handle all of the customer billing, payment channels, receivables, credit and collections, revenue risk and assurance, customer identity and fraud protection, and low-income customer assistance programs. And I have the opportunity to present the performance scorecard data to you today. As we know, October marks the first month of fiscal year 22, and with that new start, our metrics reset. This means that we only have a single data point for our year-to-date numbers at the point of October, and I would caution against putting too much emphasis on the scorecard results until we get a couple more months reported, at which time the year-to-date will begin to stabilize and we'll start to see those trends. And that said, we can compare our October fiscal year 22 results to the results for October fiscal year 21 and see if anything stands out. So we'll start with safety. And as a reminder on safety, we're now using lost time incident rate as our measure of performance. And currently we have no lost time incidents, which is a great way to start the year. We move on to customer satisfaction, and the first results of our customer satisfaction survey for our business services will arrive later today when J.D. Power reports out on the business study. And our first results for the residential study will come in early December. And our expectations are that we continue to show improvements based on the performance we've seen over the past 3 waves. For our nitrogen to the river, we released 28 tons of nitrogen into the river in October, which is consistent with October of 21. Our sanitary sewer overflows, our SSOs, in October we had 4 SSOs compared to 2 in October of 21. For our environmental compliance and permit exceedances, we had 0 electric environmental permit exceedances in October. Now we'll move into our sales. Our electric sales of 1,031 megawatt hours in October of 22 was almost the exact same as what we sold in October of 21, where we sold 1,024 megawatt hours. Our water and wastewater sales are up a bit compared to October of 21. In October of 22, we had 5,907 million gallons versus 5,360 million gallons in October of same time last year. And therefore our higher water wastewater sales also showed a higher overall revenue, up 142 million versus 137 million same time last year. We were able to reduce our outstanding debt by 92 million in October. That brings our total outstanding debt to 2.908 billion. And our electric, water, and wastewater costs came in at 28 million, an improvement over October FY21, which was 23 million. Our O&M spend is now part of the pay for performance plan, with the goal of coming in between 95 and 100% of the budgeted dollars. For capital spend in October of FY22, we saw 16 million versus 20 million for October fiscal year 21. Our fuel and purchase power expenses will now be reported as an absolute number versus dollars per megawatt hour. As you see, in October fiscal year 22, our fuel expenses came in at 50 million versus our overall goal of 372 million. Then we move down to our reliability, our electric reliability. And as a reminder, how we track grid reliability on our corporate scorecard changed this year. We now use SEMI-5, or the percent of customers experiencing 5 or more momentary interruptions. Our current performance of 0.17% is well below the year-end goal of 0.80%. And this metric is measured as a 12-month rolling average. Our effective forced outage rate, or EFOR, is 0%. Our unplanned water outages, as a reminder, this metric is highly variable from month to month, giving that a water break can impact a few dozen customers or a few thousand customers. So for October fiscal year 22, we had 311 customers impacted by unplanned water outages. And finally, our water pressure, we continue where we left off in fiscal 21 with a solid month on water pressure. Customers experienced 2.6 minutes below the target pressure of 30 PSI compared against October fiscal year 21, which was 2.8 minutes. And this concludes the monthly performance update, and we're happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Thank you, Chris. Nice job. Questions?
I have one question, John, and I'm always confused on this, Joe. The 2.9 billion of debt, restricted cash, is that taken out or not taken out?
It's not. That's the gross number.
Okay, so what would the net number be? Just general.
I think we have debt service funds and debt service reserve funds of a couple hundred.
Okay.
So we get exact
That I just, yeah, in my mind,
ballpark.
we give that number, Jay. I think we should get a net number because you're gonna pay all the debt off. No.
Yeah, we'll get that number and yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe both. That's great.
So I had a question. I know this is a moment in time, the fuel and purchase power expense, if you run that out, we're way over.
Yes.
You know, what our goal is. Is there any view as to whether that normalizes? I understand what I'm asking, by the way. I want to make sure that we understand we're going to be probably well over our target this
We are
year
going,
because of the situation.
yeah, it's a single data point that we already know what the future is going to hold, and we're going to be way over our fuel and purchase power because the market moved faster in the last 3 months than it has moved in the last 10 years. And so we will be over that target because the targets are set, you know, several months.
And it's okay.
Yeah, it is.
I'd rather.
It's part of the reason we decided to make the change to the monthly pass through is so that we would not have it would be more transparent and more active. We think that in the late part of 22, it normalizes, and then 23, and then we've got a hedging strategy to help buffer the impact to our customers.
Okay, thank you. That is the answer to my question. I will not ask it in month 2 or month 3 because it'll still be looking the way it does now.
So in January, we will start having the forecast. And so the colors that are not there right now is because it's a single point. In January, we'll have more information. And when we have more information, that will be a bright red color. Yeah.
Thank you.
Two things. One, when the JD Power results come out, since it's a long time since we till we meet again. Could you make sure we get those?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We have some of those coming out in the next few days. I think we get the first draft this afternoon for business, and then we will certainly get that out as soon as it comes in.
And I know this is a nitpick, but it's a source of irritation to me. We say we care about diversity, and yet we have NA on the scorecard. We need to do better than that.
Yes, sir.
Other questions? Okay. We don't need a motion for that.
Yes, sir.
Joe, can you tell us
Sure.
what's happening at Plant Vogtle?
Yeah, thanks, Chair Baker. So on October 27th, myself, along with Renetta, Ted, Laura, and Rich Brown, went up to Vogtle. And so here's some feedback. First, the MEAG and the Southern Nuclear Company folks, they were great hosts. And more importantly, they were very transparent. They were very good in addressing the good, the bad, the ugly, and there's a lot of bad and ugly with this project, as everybody knows, for both plants 3 and 4. They get it with respect for our need to know as soon as possible so we can adjust our fuel purchasing practices in a timely manner based on the accuracy of their milestones. And I'll talk about that a little bit more. Glenn Check, who's this Southern Nuclear Corporation's Executive Vice President for Plants 3 and 4, gave a very candid assessment and comments. He was brought in out of retirement in 2018 to help move Plants 3 and 4 along, and he knows his stuff. He's clearly frustrated with Bechtel, but is focused on fixing and preventing the future missteps. And a side comment, I'll just tell you, and maybe Renetta, Ted, and Laura can figure it out, but just who's exactly the command and control for this whole project is confusing to me. Glenn, from what I understand, although he's project oversight for 3 and 4, he doesn't have any formal authority over Bechtel. And he did confirm, though, that lessons learned from Unit 3 are being incorporated into Unit 4. But still, he really can't tell Bechtel what to do, although they listen, apparently. Glenn has been frustrated by multiple stumbles, a lot of which should have been caught earlier, and he admits that. There's been a lot of learning as you go, and the most significant challenge has been the quality control. And hence, there's a huge punch list that still needs to be worked off. 16,000 total items, 4,000 of them are good to go. 8,000 are complete but need to be signed off on, and there are additional 4K that are not complete. Southern Nuclear is hiring 100 more QC folks to help get this process going to move this punch list. So then back to the Bechtel frustration. Bechtel is responsible for the QC and is a sign-off authority, and they did not properly process these punch lists. So Glenn and his folks and these additional QC folks that are hiring have to revisit a lot of these items that were inspected that were not properly checked off. So that's caused a bit of a delay on it. But the good news is he's identified sort of how to fix his QC process. Now, whether they can meet the timelines is another thing. I asked Glenn about the optic of our frustration with the chronic overpromise and underdeliver with respect to the ever-changing milestones. And Glenn understands our frustration, and he says a couple of things. New regulations, the COVID impact, which he estimates has caused a 3-month impact on Unit 3 and a 5-month impact on Unit 4, the present delays, and construction delays. And these have to do with worker shortages, supply chain, et cetera. He says his biggest frustration has been with the construction aspect, remediating the gigs due to improper assembly installation, which we sort of saw with the wiring as one example. For the milestones, he says he needs to balance being overly pessimistic and overly optimistic for these. And right now, the current milestones for Unit 3 and 4 become operational are September 22 and June of 23. Included in those 2 milestones, he added a 6-week buffer to account for any delays. And he is comfortable personally with the September 22 for Unit 3 and the June 23 for Unit 4. Now, the big challenge is the Glenn acknowledged and they have what's called ITACs, inspection, test, analysis, and exception criteria. And getting those passed is going to be a challenge. There are 100, when Rich Brown and folks went there in September, they had 184 criteria to be signed off on. During our visit, 162 remained. Now, if I get this correctly, we should have a good indicator by by December if the September 22 startup date for Unit 3 is going to be accurate, because in December, Vogtle must have the NRC's combined operating license, it's called a 103G, issued, which then authorizes them to load fuel no later than 270 days from December, which gets us to the September of 22 date. So if Vogtle doesn't have that combined operating license by December, we're not going to make September of 22 for Unit 3, I don't think. So that's going to be a key indicator. Construction goes 24/7, and there's a beehive of activity there. They do work 7 days a week. Saturday, 60% of the workforce is there. And then on Sunday, they have 30% of the workforce. Glenn was complimentary of the workforce. And frankly, I didn't see anything contrary to that as we toured the site. The MEAG reps, especially a guy named Steve Jackson, were also very helpful and straight up. And again, they understand our frustration. He offered to come to JEA and give an operational brief of the project and do some training, although I'm still not sure what type of training would be done here. But I think there's something to be said of him coming here to brief maybe JEA workforce and our community on how this project is going. So although I was looking forward to identifying, rooting out some insurgents up in Waynesboro, I really couldn't find any, quite honestly. I still question how their command and control works, but I'll let that go. I think it would be good for the remainder of the senior leadership team who hasn't been up to Vogtle to get up there, as well as the fellow board members who have yet to go up there. You do get some good insight. And finally, as I was driving back, I had a blinding flash of the obvious where before going up there, I'm thinking MEAG and Southern Nuclear Company have the worst STRATCOM plan I've ever seen on how this, for the management of this project. But actually, it's sort of on us. Now that we have insight into how this process is going with Unit 3 and 4, I mean, we're vested into it. And I think it's important for us to get the message out to Jacksonville community on what we see, how this project is going. And we owe it to them, I think, to be candid with the good, the bad, the ugly associated with it for that. So I just recommend a JEA. I think we can craft an appropriate Vogtle outreach of some type so that the community knows that we're not just sitting by idle and rolling over as this units 3 and 4 progress on it. And then I will say, we are sort of frustrated, with lack of leverage, but we sort of do have leverage. I have no idea how many other power companies go up there up to units 3 and 4 to see how it's progressing. But Jay and his team have been doing this now, I think monthly since August or something like that. And I think as long as we keep doing that, that sort of does give us leverage, and that we're showing we're interested, and we're actually from within our resources digging into accountability on their part too. And I think they appreciate that. I think they know that. And I got the impression that they know that we're interested and also are holding them accountable to whatever extent we can on it. So I just say, I think it was good. They were very candid, very transparent with us. And I think as long as we continue to show interest and also, again, show that we do have a stake in this, that at least we'll continue to get honest assessments from them. And by December, we'll have a good idea, I think, if the September 22 for Unit 3 is going to be viable or not. So any questions at all?
None other than if we can be notified, just let us know if they make that, get that license.
Oh, we will. So I think that is one of the most important dates that we see now, and it is the last week of December, first part of January is kind of that target. And it'll be a sign about whether we are getting closer the risk adjusted date of September is better than the June date. It's more believable, but it's only a 6-week buffer,
Right.
which is really not a lot of buffer. I went to the TEU committee of the city council yesterday, and one of their main questions was about Vogtle and where it stands. And we pointed out some of the same pieces of information. And the other piece, so how we communicate and how we work within locally is important. The other piece is that Vogtle is one part of our overall, the work that we do. And we do have less direct control over it. We have much more complete control over all the rest of the things we do. And so we're really focusing on how do we manage, if there's an increased cost in one area, how do we manage and deal with that cost in other areas, and kind of understand that we have a broader portfolio than just this one project. We will continue to go visit. We're continuing to discuss and talk to others of the utilities that are in similar situations to us within the Vogtle project. And I do think that it has helped us to get a better handle on where it is so we can share that with you all in the community. And I appreciate that you took the time as a board member to go to visit the site, to have a view of it. And it was really it's as good a report as we could expect at this point, because
Right.
they were and have been open and transparent, and we have rebuilt starting in the summer of 2020, whenever Chair Baker and went to visit them, rebuilt that relationship that was broken for a period of time. And I feel very comfortable with how they are communicating with us and how we're getting information right now. So it's as good a report as it can be, and it's not a good report. I mean, it's still frustrating and it's still a problem, but we're making as good a progress as we can.
Just 2.1 is, Rick, it's an off balance sheet debt we have of $3.1 billion. So
Yeah.
give or take, and it's costing us probably what, $80 million a year,
150 million.
150 million a year. Yeah. So just in your mind, this is what this delay is. The other question I got, Jay, on clarification, the price of uranium has gone up. How will that affect will that affect the operating costs significantly or not that much?
I don't know the answer to how that impacts they have loaded fuel. Well, that is not true. They have fuel on site. And so that has already been that first round. And we'll have to keep an eye on that as it goes forward. It's still significantly less than the alternatives, $12 versus something that's increasing every day. It's 45 or 50. So we'll keep an eye on that.
Joe, you mentioned that Southern Nuclear has no control over Bechtel. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Is Southern Nuclear a subsidiary of the Southern Company?
Yes.
Why in the world would they not have control?
Good question, Chair Baker. And yeah, I don't know. And now maybe, I don't know if this has something to do with it. Westinghouse is still, although they went bankrupt, they are still the contracting authority. There's something of the authority. I don't know where, or engineering authority, something like that. And so maybe they're the ones sort of working with MEAG who have the authority that gets fuzzy at our level. But I may have that wrong. And Jay, maybe you know more than I do.
I think what they have less control over is the quality assurance component of this, but we'll work between now and January to clarify and get exactly what that relationship is and how to explain that. There are a lot of players that have different views of this. So MEAG is an owner and we are not an owner. And then there are other people that are owners, and Southern is responsible. So there's just the org chart is like a spider web instead of a controlled. is the history.
The parts,
A cost plus contract with a contractor that has no controls is a very scary thing.
and I'll just say that what threw me off was when Glenn was talking about the quality control, a number of times the folks from Bechtel would call in the NRC folks to sign off on some of these inspection items, unbeknownst to Glenn and his team. And it wasn't ready for prime time. They shouldn't have been brought in, hence a lot of these redo inspections. So then I asked Glenn, well, how the hell did Bechtel call in the NRC? Isn't there one authority that says, okay, we're all ready for the inspectors to come in for these QC things? And that's when he said, well, not really, but that's why they're trying to get their arms around it. So that was just one example of, okay, I'm just confused on who's in charge of what on it. And again, it may be me not understanding the complex web of how this whole command and control set up. It just, it's not evident to me, but it just may be me missing it.
I somehow don't think it's just you.
There's other, I would, and I'm sure Jay, you're on this, is grants, JEA. I think, if you really believe in climate, the only way you're gonna get out of it is nuclear, and I would do everything I could to get whatever grants. I mean, I've worked with Southern and MEAG because this is important to them, or more important to them than it is to us.
Yeah, and yes, sir. And I've talked to Laura Shepis and her team. We do have grant writers on board, and we do have some of the loan processes is through DOE already. And so how we can kind of package all of that, we'll continue to have those discussions. We've had the conversations with the other utilities that have contracts that look like ours, and I've had some conversations with Southern operating folks, and so having those discussions will be important. Finding ways, which not only in this area, but with the infrastructure bill that's come out, how do we manage all of the different grant opportunities that might come out of this?
In fact, Bobby, that's a good point. And on these Tuesdays, one was on Friday, the APPA had a policymaker council Zoom session, and they said now once the infrastructure bill is finally signed off on, then they'll delve into how this grant process will work and all that kind of. And I guess it's divvied out by state too, or whatever. But it's actually pretty lucrative if we can do it right. But more to follow on that.
I mean, you've got, Southern companies got the most interest in anybody getting help.
Oh, yeah.
We should work with them and MEAG to,
Mhm.
anyway.
Yes.
Okay, Joe, could you move on to the governance committee report?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Chair Baker. Governance Committee met last week, and we talked about four things, basically: the JEA bylaw modification, the board self-evaluation that we did, and then the FY 21 and 22 CEO evaluation criterion process. And there are two items that require board action today. The first is our May 6th committee minutes, which real briefly, Jody Brooks briefed JEA's tracking all applicable Article 21 provisions to make sure we're in compliance, and also a brief external look at our governance process from Hometown Connections LLC, and then the proposed agenda for the strategic conference that we did in July. So at this time, Chair Baker, I'd like to make a motion to approve this May 6th government committee meetings.
Okay, is there a second? Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we
Great.
have it.
Thank you. Second thing for action is the JEA bylaws, and if you can please pull up, I think it's page 73 of the slide deck. And this is where the committee proposes modification of the JEA bylaws, which is part of our board policy manual language around the meeting cadence to align with the charter. Currently,
I think it's in the additional information in the back.
yeah, that's 73 there.
You know what page? Don't have it on the screen.
Okay. Anyway, this is the one where currently our bylaws state monthly meetings, and the proposed language states to meet in accordance with Article 21 JE Charter, which currently has at least 8 times a year. So this just gets us in sync with what the charter says now that we are scheduled to meet 8 times a year for that. So that said, at this time, Chair Baker, I'd like to make a motion to approve the JEA bylaws modification for the meeting cadence.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, you got it.
Great, thank you. And then real briefly, 2 remaining items on the board self-evaluation, which we did. Bottom line is, nothing's broke. Board members appreciate the candid dialogue and feedback that we have with Jay and the senior leadership team, as well as the entire workforce. What's going well? Board members understand JEA's mission, strategic objectives, the city charter, the bylaws, policy, and public records, and the Florida statutes. The board also likes the way meetings are run, understand JEA's programs and services, and then, of course, the board's relationship with the CEO. Areas of consideration. So there were around 6 areas that scored below 4.5 on the scale. First was the board members receive a comprehensive orientation to prepare them to perform their roles and responsibilities. Now, staff has worked to update this orientation approach, and actually with Rick going through it right now, we can also get good feedback from you, Rick, if we need to make any adjustments on it. Second item was the board is represented with the necessary skills, stakeholders, and diversity. Now this one, we had a little bit of discussion. Earlier this year, the board put forth a resolution to the city encouraging diversity of the board. So that's good. And we'll continue to emphasize diversity. And Chair Baker, your comment on the scorecard on diversity, we got to figure it out and tease out more specifics on it. We did have a brief sidebar on the composition of the board. Really, it's sort of up to city council and the mayor because they're the ones who nominate the board members on that from a diversity perspective on it. Next thing was the board self-education on industry trends. And this was a difficult question to answer. And the committee sort of thinks it's safe to conclude that all the board members understand the importance of self-education. And we're also relying on the senior leadership team to get us, keep us abreast of industry trends and changes. And we see this again with the candid dialogue we have with the Jay and the senior leadership team on that. And really, as we go through these board meetings with Jay's strategic focused areas, we sort of do get a running estimate of what the trends are as we go from board meeting to board meeting. So I think they're being addressed right now, or the committee thinks they're being addressed right now. And as we continue to refine the strategic focus and get to those areas at board meetings, we're pretty comfortable with staying abreast of the trends on it overall. So I don't know for the other folks here, if you have a comment on that.
I'll add on that particular
Please.
item. We are working on finding a way to be sure that we get a digestible kind of summary of information that you can see the trends and information that we can send to you on a regular basis. But we have the digestible and not overdoing is the key. And so it will not be a daily kind of communication. It'll be some kind of a balance on a regular basis to be sure that we're getting articles and trends and information to you. So that's one of the ways that we think we can get things out in front of you a little bit better.
Good. And then when we talked about the CEO performance review, and the good news is we currently are doing that. In fact, I think yesterday was the deadline for us board members to submit the evaluation, and then that'll go on for further processing with Jay and Chair Baker. And then the CEO succession plan. Again, we all know Jay spent the last year building a team, and now that the leadership team is complete, now Jay and the staff will work to develop the succession plan, which I think we'll be reviewing in March.
Sir.
Great. Okay, then lastly, for the FY21 CEO evaluation criteria and process, again, the evaluation closed yesterday, and the committee likes the way the key performance areas and key performance indicators are consolidated on a one-page scorecard. So I think that's a sustain for that. We talked a little about the core competencies, and again, we admit it's still a very extensive list, but the idea here, it does provide a good subjective perspective to focus on the important values, leadership traits, and other characteristics associated with getting a good culture within JEA. So the committee members think it's still good reference to core competencies. And no one had any issues with the timeline that shows the dates for Chair Baker's debrief with Jay and then the board's back brief, which goes in January 11th right now, according to the timeline. And then on the FY22 CEO evaluation criteria, really one of the changes will incorporate the 2 revised MOEs, which we saw today on the scorecard, with the lost time incident rate replacing the recordable incident rate, and then our adjusted JD Power goals for that. And then we did discuss possibly incorporating a new PA, something akin to the turnover, retention, employment satisfaction, something like that. So we board members can get an insight into what the workforce is thinking, their level of satisfaction or something like that. And so Jay said he'd look into developing a metric like that. And that was the main highlights from the meeting. Our next one's scheduled to be on 14 March of next year.
Questions of Joe?
You've been busy. Thank you.
Okay.
Great report.
Thanks, Jay.
You did a nice job of capsulating an hour's, very good discussions that you led. We move into other business. Is there any old or other new business to discuss?
Wonder if it's appropriate at this time, Chair, to convene the nominating committee because we don't meet in December. I mean, would we do that in January? I'm just mindful that you've been doing this forever. And
I'm mindful of it too.
is that a
Do we-
January convening
think
for
it's-
February?
It's January or February.
Okay. Okay. all
Chair
right.
Chair Baker thinks it's this afternoon. I think we do need to, we'll look at that and call it in the right time because the changes in June, July, I'm looking to see. So we'll get that with plenty of time. Last time, I think we had it a little bit early. We also have renominations that come up in February, I think, for a couple of you. And so we'll balance all of those things and get the right timeline.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Here for you.
I have no chair's report, and the next board meeting is January 11th, and I think we can move into our strategic direction now.
Great, thank
Jay,
you.
will you take over?
I will, no, sir, but I will do this part. It's still your meeting. We will start with an overview of that economic outlook that we talked about in the beginning. And Ken Scheibel is the Managing Director of PFM Asset Management, and Mike Mace is the Managing Director of PFM Financial Advisors. They're going to share their view from our as financial advisors to us, their view of the economy. And this is, even this part is discussion. So they are, I'm pretty sure they're excited about the opportunity for you to interrupt them with questions if you need to. And I know the leadership team, as we move into the rest of the strategic discussion is. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Ken for him to start the presentation.
Thank you. Good morning. We appreciate the opportunity to provide some information to the board this morning about current and expected economic conditions and how they might affect JEA and its business and consumer customers. I'll cover a few topics and really try to hit some of the highlights and then dive a little bit deeper into some of the key areas that certainly are in the news these days. In the US, we're still in the recovery phase of this economic cycle that's been so disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic. The surge in cases at late summer slowed growth in the near term, but the broader effects continue to linger in the form of labor shortages, supply chain challenges, and surging prices for many goods and services. Responding to these challenges, the Federal Reserve will play a key role in the direction of future interest rates, especially as an anchor to short-term rates, but their response to the inflationary pressures will also have an impact on longer-term rates. And we'll return to each of these topics shortly. Looking at gross domestic product, which is the sum of all goods and services produced by the US economy, after strong growth in the first half of the year, which averaged 6.5%, and that was the strongest back-to-back quarters pre-pandemic going back to 1984. We did see a decline to just 2% in the third quarter. And the two biggest drivers were a sharp deceleration in consumer spending, focused in part in things like autos and food service, which again were constrained by the COVID surge, and the inflation adjustment. Since GDP is reported as real GDP, it's adjusted for price changes, and the price impact was fairly significant in the second quarter. So that pulled down nominal growth to a much lower reported real GDP reading of only 2%. Just for some context, growth in the 5 years prior to the pandemic averaged about 2.3%. So even though we took a big dip in the second quarter, it's really in kind of that historical range, although we had been growing quite strongly in the recovery phase. Looking forward, economists expect a rebound to 4.8% this quarter, followed by a gradual deceleration throughout 2022, eventually returning to more trend growth in 2023 and beyond. The shaded bars on the right also show the range of forecasts from a survey of economists, which show an unusually high level of uncertainty for what is a $23 trillion economy. Despite the third quarter slowdown in GDP, consumer activity has remained strong, bouncing back quickly from the shutdown in the economy last year. In the chart on the left, you can see that retail sales activity has not only rebounded, but is tracking at a pace well in excess of pre-pandemic spending levels. Year over year, spending is up nearly 14%. Some of that is due to the reduced spending last year, but some of it's also due to the pickup in demand from the reopening process, as well as price increases. So a surge in spending on gasoline, for example, is really more related to price than it is quantity, and that affects many of the items shown on the list on the right as well. So how have consumers been able to increase spending despite what was a deep, although short recession? The difference was the rapid response of policymakers to replace income to households through stimulus checks and enhanced unemployment benefits, and to provide businesses with grants to keep people employed. Now, the chart on the left shows that for the first time in history, income actually went up during a recession. At the same time, because spending initially plunged, that created a glut of savings at the consumer level. Even today, the personal savings rate is nearly 9%, which is very large by historical standards. That's translated into tremendous increasing demand. Initially for goods, we're all getting all those packages delivered every day from Amazon. And also with the reopening, a demand for services like travel and leisure and hospitality, we're starting to return to restaurants and resorts and so forth. At the same time, the decline in long-term interest rates affected mortgage rates and allowed homeowners to refinance mortgages and reduce household debt service costs even more, a trend that had been in place really since the prior recession in 2008. We'll look at inflation in a moment, but we have kind of the perfect storm of strong demand fueled by this excess savings on top of constrained supply. On the labor front, we've also seen significant progress with over 5.8 million new jobs created so far this year. That's pushed the national unemployment rate down to 4.6% from a peak last year of nearly 15%. The unemployment rate here in Florida is very much in line with the national data. But there's still about 4 million fewer people working today than pre-pandemic. And that's despite a record number of job openings. And of course, we can see that on virtually every street corner, businesses looking for workers. There's actually more than one job for every unemployed person today, which is quite unusual. But at the moment, labor seems to have the upper hand. and many folks are either quitting one job to get to another or reluctant to return to work due to either COVID hesitancy or perhaps childcare or elder care responsibilities. And of course, we've all gotten used to working at least in part from home. As we all know, inflation readings are very high. The consumer price index is now up 6.2% over the past year if we include the recently released October data. But about half of that inflation is from energy prices and new and used car prices. So we broke down that consumer price index into its constituents. And while there's broad-based inflation across many categories, the ones on the left, energy and car prices, really stand out as being outliers. That's in part, energy is sort of its own category, and car prices are really a function of the supply chain disruptions that occurred. Consumers are very sensitive to inflationary pressures, especially those that they see in more common goods like food and clothing. And while the Federal Reserve believes that today's price pressures will turn out to be transitory, consumers are expecting inflation to be both higher and more sticky and lasting longer. At the producer level, energy and supply chain problems have really caused a surge in producer prices, the inputs to the manufacturing process in particular. Again, energy is the key driver there. Energy prices up very, very significantly over the past year. Some of this is a comparison of year over year figures where prices were somewhat depressed last year. But again, a lot of these higher costs for materials, industrial metals, and energy are starting to flow through, certainly into costs, which are being passed on to businesses and consumers. Looking at energy more specifically, oil prices have been affected by both supply and demand forces. Historically, oil price shocks have been caused typically by physical disruptions of supply. The current price pressures are caused by combination of a strong rebound in demand with the economic reopening. At the same time, supply has been constrained. So for example, the number of active oil wells in the US fell by about 3/4 last year with the big drop off in demand in the early days of the pandemic, and those are only recently coming online. So the capacity to produce energy here in the US is constrained, and of course, it's a global market subject to OPEC constraints as well. Only recently have they decided to increase production. So resources are somewhat constrained at the same time that demand is strong. Prices are high, obviously, looking at these charts here, which only go back for the past couple of years, but they're not unprecedented levels. Oil, gasoline, and heating oil prices were as high or higher during the period from 2008 to 2014. For example, the all-time high on oil prices was over $150 a barrel in June of 2008. So we were used to several years of much lower prices. So these certainly look like a big change, but they're not unprecedented at today's levels. So, of course, the Fed is focused on the key areas of employment and inflation, recognizing certainly the inflationary pressures that are built into the system. This is what they call their dot plot, which shows the individual forecasts by individual Fed members and governors of where they think the appropriate level of short-term rates should be at the end of each of the next few years. So in the red circle shows the forecast for the end of next year, end of 2022. And about half the Fed thinks that rates should be held near zero where they are today. And about half the Fed thinks that the economy will need or is appropriate for 1 or 2/4% rate hikes. And then if you look into future years, of course, we're building in expectation for more hikes, but ultimately, even in the long run, for interest rates to remain at relatively modest levels. What the Fed did announce most recently was a tapering of their large-scale asset purchase program that's phasing down the $120 billion a month of purchases of treasuries and agency mortgage-backed securities. That was put in place in the early days of the pandemic to help provide liquidity to the system, to help grease the wheels of the financial system, and to help keep interest rates, especially long-term interest rates, low to fuel economic activity. That has certainly worked, given the strength of the recovery. However, the Fed separates that tapering decision from any decision about ultimately raising rates. But we could look at market indicators like the futures market, which is now pricing in the first rate hike around the middle part or early part of the third quarter next year, and fully pricing in 2 short-term rate hikes next year. So how that affects the whole Treasury yield curve is shown on the left. We see that yields have moved higher recently over the past couple of months, with that expectation that the Fed might begin to move next year. The largest movement took place in the intermediate part of the yield curve, the 2 to 5 year range. Long-term yields are a bit higher in the 10-year, but actually lower in the 30-year than they were a month or so ago. So we call that a yield curve flattening. This is not unusual at this phase of the cycle where the Fed is getting ready to potentially start to raise rates. In addition to the current yields shown in blue, we're also showing the 1-year forward yields. That's the yields implied by today's level of interest rates that the market implicitly expects yields to be a year from now. And you can see they're modestly higher in the short intermediate range, but really not that much change in the long-term area. That's, I think, the market's confidence that the Fed will respond appropriately to economic and inflationary forces. So if we look at the trajectory of long-term yields on the right side of the page, that's based on current yields plus then economic forecast going forward. The forecast expectations are for a gradual rise in long-term rates, but nothing very significant or nothing demonstrating huge moves or spontaneous kind of volatility. Next, I'll turn to another area that certainly is important these days and was touched on in the discussion earlier this morning. Here's some aggregate data on large weather and climate-related events over the past 4 decades or so. Those with at least $1 billion of costs, and these are costs that are adjusted for inflation. So it's not just that storms today cost more, but it's inflation-adjusted dollars. The blue bars represent the overall cost, and the gray line shows the total number of events by category on the left and by decade on the right. So you can see on the left that tropical cyclones and hurricanes are the most costly events, but other severe storms, droughts, and flooding events can also create very large damages. The chart on the right demonstrates that this has been getting more severe decade by decade. And in fact, the year 2022 had $22 billion events, which was the largest ever, including 14 hurricanes and 7 major hurricanes. That was the most active Atlantic hurricane season on record. So things do seem to be accelerating a bit. 2021, so far, we've seen $18 billion events. Those events are depicted here. Each of these represents at least $1 billion overall costs. The 18 events so far this year. Of course, hurricane season runs through November 30th, and storms have occurred outside that typical June to November window anyway. But you can see the concentration of storm-related activity along the Gulf Coast and generally across the Southeast more generally. And since hurricanes are the greatest risk to the JEA service area and Florida more generally, it's useful to understand the potential, especially for property risk. This chart shows the number of properties estimated to be at risk from hurricane storm surge, depending on the severity of the storm. So the different shades of blue represent different storm hurricane categories, and the number of properties that would be at risk for a storm of that magnitude. Of course, the stronger the storm, the more properties would be at risk. But you can see that really Florida leads the whole United States in terms of exposure. And as noted, more than 3/4 of Florida's population resides in coastal counties exposed to either Atlantic or Gulf Coast storms, in large part just due to the geography of the state, where 35 of the 67 counties have a coastline. So Florida is particularly vulnerable, as you can see here, to climate and weather-related events. Now I'll turn it back to Mike to talk more specifically about rate setting policy and so forth.
Sure, thanks, Ken. Good morning. It's good to see everybody and be seen by everybody. I don't think that was the most cheerful presentation that you've ever had in talking about some of the cost pressures and the shocks to the system that you have seen. But it's very important to look at these things from the standpoint of one of the largest utilities or municipally owned utilities in the country. And if you look around the rest of the landscape in the municipal utility world, that you can see many and perhaps really most of the municipal utilities out there, the major ones, have experienced considerable shocks to the system over the last year or so. Most notably was Winter Storm Uri, where you had a lot of the major public power entities experience significant cost increases. The ones I have listed here, I think each one of them had a cost increase on fuel or purchase power that was over a couple of days in excess of 15% of the annual costs that they experience in fuel and purchase power. And for some of them, that percentage share was much larger. For San Antonio, it was in the neighborhood of $1 billion of cost. You've also seen severe impacts of tropical storms and hurricanes. Long Island Power Authority had a tropical storm Isaias, which caused about 300 million in damage. It knocked out, there was a major failure to the information system during the storm, where they were really without contact with their customers for 3 or 4 days. Louisiana Power and Energy has one of its projects, its largest participant, over 20%, was the utility in the city of Houma, which was essentially wiped out by Hurricane Ida. So a significant challenge there to the repayment of debt. And then we've seen sharp increases in natural gas prices that have had a severe impact on a number of major public power utilities that are large users of natural gas. And you can see them listed here, and these are the household names. In addition, they're dealing with all the other factors that Ken had described, which is labor shortages and costs, supply and cost of fuel, some of the other events, wildfires on the West Coast, supply chain disruption, the lingering effects of COVID-19, and always the ever-changing environment in the environmental legislation and regulation. So certainly a lot that our public power and utility world folks are dealing with. Here, we have kind of a bias toward the utility sector, the electric utility sector in the municipal utility world. It's primarily because here's where we see more volatility on the cost side, but certainly if you look at the water side of the business, water sewer side of the business, you have the potential for increased capital costs and materials costs, but usually you can see some of those capital costs, for example, coming from a little further away, and you're able to react to them. And just showing how some of our utility clients have responded to these things. One thing to remember, as you well know, that the utility system or municipal utility system really is a closed loop. And you have a cost of service rate making methodology where you pass through all those costs to customers, and they will bear the cost of whether it's these one-shot events that occur, some of the weather events, or more systemic increases in costs. They will bear these costs. It's just a matter of when. Is it immediate or is it over time? And the challenge is how much of these costs to pass on to the customer, and how and when to impose the costs. Well, we see some examples on the investor-owned utility side where they increasingly look to defer some of the cost of the major one-time events like wildfires, weather events, plant closures, and they use debt securitization to do this, where they'll issue debt to recover these costs, and they're able to issue AAA rated securitization debt, recover these costs over time, as opposed to recovering them over time at an investor-owned utility blended cost of debt and equity. And one thing to think about here is that when we are having multiple once-in-a-lifetime events like wildfires, weather events, plant closures, if they occur every 3 to 5 years, they're not really once-in-a-lifetime events. So we shouldn't be spreading these costs over 20 years when you know maybe 5 years down the line you'll have something similar. It just has the potential to put too much of this kind of cost onto the future ratepayers. One thing that we see as a way to deal with more of the cost increases is implementing rate design that is responsive and passes along these costs in a fair manner to customers. The rate design out there in the public power and utility world varies greatly, anywhere from having something like fuel and purchase power costs that are very retroactive and kind of bulky to implement and may only occur every couple of years versus some of the more forward-looking responsive mechanisms, for example, the one that the EA recently put in place on the electric side. And it's really akin to informing investors in the same way that they go out there every day and they look at the local gas station and they see what the cost is and they can make decisions accordingly. To the extent they have utility rates that are really backward looking and not very responsive, they're not able to make those same kind of decisions. So we greatly encourage, when we're asked, our public power customers, our utility customers, to put into effect these kinds of responsive rate designs that really enable their customers to take as much control as possible into the decision that they make to use utilities. At this point, Ken or I would be very happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much. That's a very thorough and wide-ranging and scary report, I might add. Do y'all have any questions you'd like to ask them? My thoughts is I listen to you all, that the big issues as we go into our strategic thinking are interest rates, fuel hedging, resiliency versus hurricanes, labor shortages, and capital costs driven by inflation. And totally unfair, but I can't resist. What would you be doing about refinancing interest rates? Do you think, I heard this morning coming in that the long rates might not be going up very much, but the 3 to 5 year rates might be the ones that go up. How would you deal with that if you were JEA's treasurer?
Well, I can answer that from the perspective of a lot of the other large municipal utilities around the country. To the extent any of them have any debt that they can get at quickly and call from the market and refinance at lower rates, they're doing exactly that. And that is certainly what JEA has done. I think the tougher question is when you have some bonds that you can't call out of the market right away, that it's maybe 1 to 2 to 3 years out there, is whether you go ahead and get into the market somehow today and bear some type of a hedging cost, whether that's a taxable advance refunding or some type of an interest rate swap or a forward transaction. There are plenty of options, but each one of them imposes some amount of either cost or risk or both to them. So you have to really do the analysis of whether getting in there and locking in today's rates is worth some of that. I would say that most of our clients who have a lot of 4 and 5% debt out there, they're choosing to be fairly aggressive to find some ways to get at that debt. But if that means some of the longer call dates out into 2024 and 5 and 6, if you're paying up 100 basis points or more in terms of hedging costs, then those entities certainly are not moving anywhere near it as quickly, because they're seeing the same thing, that while everybody expects rates to go up, maybe normal is a 3% treasury bond and not quite back to a 6% treasury bond. So I think I would say if you have opportunities to get at debt where you don't have those high hedging costs, maybe some of the candidates that are refundable in over the next 2 years, those should be seriously looked at. But once you get further out than that, the cost can be prohibitive.
The second question I had was, would you be hedging fuel costs at this point in time, or do you expect that we are kind of in a spike and that we can think that as gas wells come back on, that gas may or should decline?
Well, I think when you get into the fuels area, that's beyond our area of expertise, but I certainly we're seeing a lot of what you're seeing in terms of the price history and what is happening with wells, the well count in the U.S. And there's very high expectation that the natural gas market should normalize to some degree. So I don't know about locking in $5 and $6 natural gas, because that's kind of what you can look at 2 years from now and really regret. I don't think anybody's talking about returns to $7, $8 plus natural gas. So I don't know if I would be as aggressive on hedging these levels, and that's more from the standpoint of seeing what our other clients are doing as opposed to my own personal expertise in the gas markets.
The other thing I'd add, John, that we hadn't talked about is our production capacity. You know, with electric vehicles coming online, we're making, you got to make decisions today, 5 years down the road, if we want to increase capacity. And I think it's something we should look at and be interested in your thoughts, or what would you do if you're looking at building capacity on the production side?
Well,
Or should you be?
the clients we have that are experiencing some growth, if you look at Salt River Project in Phoenix, that they have and are continually looking at buying gas-fired assets that are out there in the market. They're not as available as they were. So some of them clearly see the need for, and I think you used the right word there, capacity, because they have certainly ambitious sustainability plans, but all of that renewable resource that they might bring online needs to be backed up by capacity. So if there is cost-effective capacity that combines well with the renewable resources, that seems to be the predominant game plan.
How many people do you see focusing on wind and solar? I mean, Nextera's kind of gone all in on wind and solar. Is that going to be the next disruptor?
I think the wind and solar focus has really been in existence for 3 years or so. And that's a very strong focus on the part of all of our public power entities. Even the ones that don't seem to be as focused are focused, and some it's their primary focus. So I continue to see, now that offshore wind is starting to come into the range of cost effectiveness and solar battery storage. But once again, all of that has to be backed up by some kind of reliable capacity.
Yeah, but I mean, Marty, I've been studying this, and you look at wind and solar, it's 2 or 3% of overall production. The real opportunities, nuclear, and the plants that we're talking about building, you got 2 micro plants, one in, next to these, one's in Wyoming, one's in New Mexico. There are 30 nuclear plants being built around the world. I think there's 2 here, and those are going to be in production besides the one we're dealing with in 2028, 29. So that's where, so natural gas is the real opportunity if you're going to build capacity. But from Jay's standpoint, how do you think about that? I mean, that's my question.
Well, I ask the team a very complicated question after we have a presentation like this, and the question is, so what? So we get all this outside influence. You summarized all of the issues. We are, what they've just talked about is inflation is largely driven by energy. We're largely energy, which we talk about in natural gas and the other side of things. the concerns and cost pressures are largely driven by what we refer to as once in a lifetime events that are occurring every 3 or 4 years. The question about how do we refinance appropriately, how do we hedge appropriately, how do we get prepared appropriately are part of the strategic discussions that we'll hear about a little bit more today. We put it under the box of sound financial decisions, which is not just hedging or just rates. It is all of the decisions that we make. What should our capacity look like is in our integrated resource plan discussions. And it's not 5 or 6 years, it's 30 years. We're looking out 30 years. We have what is a flat growth on the electric side of our business. And in spite of adding 10,000 meters a year, we're adding a large number of meters a year, and we see flat growth, which changes what we look like from the past 10 or 15 years. There's been a separation between customer growth and energy growth. Similarly on the wastewater side, although it's a little bit more increase. So when we look at this, it is how do we balance all of those things? I appreciate that the last time this happened was 2008, 9, 10, and we might have all been in that, seen that happen in the natural gas side of the world. But 12 or 13 or 14 years ago is a lifetime ago in our policy. So we've had policies that have been in place since that time, which was caution and defensive. And we are looking at our hedging policies in order to balance those things. We're never be speculative. We're not speculating in gas. We're using the gas. It's our largest single cost right now in our fuel. And so we have to be sure that we're being thoughtful about that. We can see it when we look out the window. The North Side Generation Plant is an aging plant that uses coal and petcoke that is not the direction that most utilities are moving at this point. So we have to be thoughtful about that. We also have a lot of employees that have done an incredible job of keeping that running as efficiently as they can, and we need to support them. So all of these things tie in, and all of them, I think, fit really nicely into the strategic direction and the things that we're thinking about. And we have no specific answers. We have to be aware of those things. So on the small modular nuclear reactors, we're getting updates on how the nuclear project that we got involved in 2007. Last time we did a deep dive in the history of that, 2006, 7, 8 is when we started that process. Even a small nuclear modular plant is going to take a very long time. And I'm not prepared to know enough about that to suggest that we start a discussion to get involved in that yet directly. But we are looking at joining the EPRI, the Electric Power Research Institute, that does research on things like this, that partner with Oak Ridge Labs and the projects you're talking about, and how we can be aware of those things and be available fits into technology, tools, data, integrated resource plan, smart, sound financial decisions, and all of the things that we talk about in our business excellence component of this. This feeds in. I don't know for sure if the natural gas prices, I know for sure they went up really more steeply than we've seen in many, many years. Right now, they seem to be, the forward-looking curve seemed to flatten out. We've got more hedged now than we have in the past in order to protect our customers, because that's in the end what we're trying to do. And so the way we think about it is exactly what we're presenting in all of our areas, because we talk about the economy. I've actually presented it like this. They're going to talk about things that are outside of our control. And then they talk about storms and energy and resiliency and natural gas. And it's all the things we actually do control. And it is all the things that we're supposed to be looking at every day. So that's why we wanted to have what appears to be this large, very large outside influence that really is all about what we do and how we impact our customers every day.
The other thing we hadn't talked about is regulation.
Right.
You know, this discharge. Yeah, I mean, that's going to be
Expense.
another.
Well, so it's regulation directly on us, like the
Discharge.
surface water discharge, but it's also regulation on, even on the nuclear industry. I believe it will be difficult to make the nuclear work appropriately, even in the small modular size, as long as the regulations are still for the large scale. So if we keep regulations at the large scale and try to implement with all the same rules and regulations the smaller scale, then that could be a little bit of pressure on us.
Jay, are you saying that you feel with the growth of electric vehicles that our production capacity is in pretty good shape?
No, our production capacity is in reasonably good shape for the short term, and the IRP will inform us on what it needs to be on the long term.
Okay.
We are not going into the IRP. The integrated resource plan is not a preset answer. It is an open discussion. We'll have stakeholders and then we'll decide what that needs to look like. The complication is that if we need to build facilities, they don't get built in a day or two. There's long-term cost, and then it ties back into your first question about debt and about what should we refinance now, what should we finance longer term. And Ted's going to talk about this whenever we get into part of the discussion, but we have a chart that shows the debt dropping from 2011 till now, and we've done a great job with that. That was a perfect strategy for those 10 or 12 years, but it may not be the right strategy now. How do we transition to a changing world?
Jay, Bobby brought it up twice, and I think it's really a super important question. From the previous administration, we heard that conservation was going to drive electric consumption down over the years. But then we've started to see growth in the population that we hadn't seen in a long time in Jacksonville. And if you believe the stock market, and who knows whether to believe the stock market, but it's got a pretty good track record, electric vehicles are the future. And it's hard for me to imagine that if everybody is getting their energy for their car out of the plug instead of out of the pump, that's got to be a huge number. I'd love to have us really focus on that.
So we'll get into some more detail on that. And that is, it's a big issue, not only on the capacity of our generation, but on our distribution system and the transformer sizing at individual homes and businesses. If you add this and don't have other programs in place to encourage the wise timing and use of this, then we could have a problem. We have implemented some storage programs over the last couple of years that allow people to have battery storage at their house. We will need to have more flexible rate. That actually falls into this customer loyalty that Sheila and Laura primarily will talk about a little bit on how we are going to respond to the different segments of customers on how to allow them to have the electric vehicle they want, and have it not impact the system too much. And that's going to be an interesting balance. While it is an increasing number, it is still a relatively small number now. Some of the facilities, some of the targets are 100% electric being sold in 2035. So I don't expect us to see, even when most of the cars being sold become electric, most of the cars on the road will still not be electric. And so it's a long-term deal, not something that is going to happen overnight. And it allows us to model that and understand how that impacts it within our integrated resource plan.
I think one of the key things in this plan, which changes, you look at, gas is an issue, interest rates are an issue, but there's a hell of a lot of money in Washington that we should figure out how to get every grant we can sooner than later. I mean, whether it's nuclear, whether it's discharge, whether it's whatever we can get, we should be the best grant writers and thinking through that as our short-term number one priority, because those are dollars that are out there and people are going to get them and we should get them. And that being said, I just think that's an opportunity.
Yeah, and I think so, Laura. I don't know if you want to hit on that. We do have grant writers on. Retainer might not be the right legal word, but
Yes, sir. We do have a grant writer secured and starting to come on with us. We have gone through the first layer of review of the big infrastructure bill that was signed into law a few days ago. We see 5 to 7 real potential pots of money that we can look at, and we're engaging in that next level of review to see across electric and water, wastewater, what we can realistically pursue in partnership with the state or local government stakeholders. So we'll have some more information on that, I would say mid-December.
But Jay, like on nuclear, like Southern, how do you integrate with those guys on Vogtle? I'm asking the question. And MEAG, how do we work together to get?
we do what you are doing and we bring it up every single time because it's that one has to be a partnership.
Yeah.
And so we have relationships with the DOE, we have relationships with Southern, and we will continue to have those discussions. And more broadly, we're going to look at every single opportunity that's appropriate for us to look at grants and funding. We believe, and I'm going to say this, and you can fix this, Laura, but I think that the way this this law, the bill that was signed, is going to come forward is not like some of the stimulus type packages, which was just money thrown. This is going to go through rulemaking. It's going to go through each. It's going to be funded through some agency that's then may fund it through the state, and so it's multiple layers, and it's a long term kind of a plan, not a short term. In the next 3 months, there's going to be lots of money flowing. Is the way that I'm interpreting the information we've got.
That is
It's 3
how-
days old.
And they are part of the structure of the big infrastructure bill is that it's attempting to build a capacity at the Department of Energy for distributing grants across a range of programs, clean energy programs that they haven't really had that capacity before. So that's going to also act to make it a slower, more methodical process for us to follow and engage in, and not a shovel ready sprint as we saw in 2009.
And another kind of component of this that I haven't talked to Jody about, but I want us to be sure that we pay attention to is the relationship between the funding sources and the city. Because oftentimes these are funding sources that actually, they may not come directly to JEA as a utility. They'll come through the city. And so we'll have to work through the legal challenges of being sure that as the city has opportunities that are squarely focused on utility related activities, that we can do that. So there's a government relations and a legal kind of component of how we get those things all the way down to the local level. It's complicated at the federal level, and it can continue to be complicated at the local level.
Okay.
I had an entire lead in that I'm going to jump past. The strategic focus areas, though, I want to remind us that they stay consistent. That when you look at the slide that has our single slide that has our strategy on it, we are focused on doing everything we do through the lens of our of our values. I think we've seen um, some organizations that might have lost track of their values and how they may still have a strategy, but the values are important. So safety, respect, and integrity will be how we approach everything that we do. They are not going to change. The three strategic focus areas of developing an unbeatable team that David and primarily David reviewed back in August will stay on the topics that we're calling objectives within that. The things that, without going into the details on all of these, employee engagement, we're working on a survey to be available in spring. Diversity, equity, inclusion, we have a director position that we are in the process of filling. Succession planning is a long-term workforce part of the project that we are moving forward to have you information back in February. Today, you're going to hear from the rest. And David, you're welcome to chime in if you have something you want to say. But the rest of the leadership team has some review of information on business excellence and customer loyalty are the two topics that we're going to kind of jump into today. And I jumped around so much that there's no way for anybody to know what slide we're going to be on. And so if we go ahead and go forward to the delivering business excellence slide, and I'll turn it over. This is a discussion both between the board and the leadership team, and Ted and Renetta are going to take the lead on the first part of the business excellence discussion. And please interrupt if you have questions, and we'll try to answer them and walk through this together.
Before you get started, Jay, I just want to compliment you on putting this team together. It's, you and John have done a fabulous job. We've got a great team that you guys have spent a lot of time working on. So I just want to thank you.
Thank you. They are a great team, and they help support the rest of the great team. So thank you.
That gives me a perfect segue. So I wanted to start with a little story. 2 or 3 weeks ago, I walked around to Ray's office, and so Ray and I started the first day. So I don't know if you remember what it's like to start an organization, but when you start someplace with somebody, there's like a little special bond there, right? I mean, you came in the first day together. So even though Ray had already been here, I still think of us starting the same day. And so I walked down to her office and just said, how's it going? We've been here 7, 8 weeks. How you feeling? And she's like, oh, it's great. And we were, talking about the team and how we seem to, even though we haven't been together very long, really have gelled very, very quickly. But we all have very different and unique personalities. And I think you'll see that as you just listen to us give presentations over time. We all approach things from a different standpoint, but it seems to work so well. And, I had kind of, like you said, General, that obvious epiphany, and it's because we have that same values. I really think that all 8 of us and even the extended leadership team come with those values. And so I think that is really what is the thing that holds us all together. So anyway, you didn't ask for that. That wasn't what I was supposed to talk about, but I wanted to share it. So I'm going to try to talk a little bit about reasonable rates and sound financial decisions and technology tools and data. Those are kind of areas that I have a little bit of my team is more in control over. And so I don't know, Ken's charts were very interesting to me. That they almost seem like a guy who designs roller coasters. Because they go up and down, and really what that's kind of telling me is that, we're in a big time of change. Changes are happening very, very quickly. But we can just start with natural gas rates. So, we saw natural gas rates be very flat for the better part of 10 years. And then we saw this huge spike in 3 months. And so I think, as far as figuring out how do we hedge that, we have to have um, policies and procedures in place where we can adapt very quickly as the environment and the world around us is changing very quickly. I don't think we sit down today and say, okay, this is what we're going to do. And you and your team go do it for the next year, and we'll talk about it again come next year, because I can't tell you what's going to happen 2 weeks from now, much less 2 quarters from now. So we have to develop our hedging policies. So we want to do a programmatic hedge where we're looking out over maybe a longer time span, maybe 3-4 years. But we also want to have in place things where we can see the market as it becomes more volatile, so we can take advantage of doing defensive hedging when we see more volatility in the market. And then we also want to, as we see the market come down, do some discretionary hedging, so we can catch some of those lower ends of the market. So, we're even now when we're hedging out, we're not buying $5 and $6 gas. We're buying $3 and $3.25 gas out into the future. So as we change into this new fuel adjustment with our customers, I think it's going to be even more and more important that our customers know what those prices are going to be out into the future. So, as we come to you in the spring and early summer next year with budgets, I would like to see us even more hedged so that our customers know what that fuel rate is going to be into FY23. So what does that do? That helps us take off those peaks, but we're also going to give up some of those valleys, right? And we have to know that. But if you'll go back and you look at, you can look at the gas market, you pick any time you want, 5 years, 10 years, 30 years. The upticks are always sharper than the downs, right? So by go ahead and hedging that out, we send that price signal to our customers, and so that they can plan and they can budget for themselves into the next year, and they're not just flying into it blindly for them, and we're not just having to ride the market, which we don't have any control over, but how we price, if we can, how we are strategic about how we do our pricing, we can help do that. And that's just one example. So we're doing the same thing with our stock and our inventory, right? So we've seen lead times increase dramatically on some of the items that we need to have. So we've adjusted to that, and we have we have more things on order because we know it's going to take it longer to get here, so that we can have the supply chain logistics that we need to have. But we also need to watch that as well. That doesn't need to be how we do business for the next 10 years. We need to be watching that, being careful, making changes so that when these things start coming back into a normal timelines and normal things, that we can adjust that, and we're not just keep stocking a bunch of stuff that take us 2 years to get through. So because that's cash that we have in a transformer that's sitting on a yard somewhere that could be cash in our bank that we could be using for something else. Also, so where are interest rates going to go? And so we have to be prepared now, not for just one strategy for interest rates, but several strategies for interest rates, just like everything else. So how are we going to adapt? What will our plan be if rates go up at a slower rate as opposed to a higher rate? When will we pull triggers to take some of our variable debt and turn it into fixed rate debt? When will we pull the triggers to refinance debt? So one of the I don't want to still raise thunder, but one of the things she's going to talk about, and we've already talked about, is we have literally billions of dollars worth of infrastructure on the water and wastewater side, right? So do we look to programs like WIFIA? So I'm not sure if you're familiar with WIFIA, but it's a federal loan program, and so those rates are depending on where interest rates, sometimes slightly below market rates and sometimes significantly below market rates, depending on where interest rates are going. So if we start to see interest rates climb quickly, those WIFIA rates, the spread on that will be even more. So we need to have things like that in our tool bag and be ready to pull the trigger now and know what we need to do rather than wait for it and then say, oh, well, that's too late. We don't want to wait another 6 months to go through the federal approval process to get something. So we need to have, be ready to take whatever fork in the road comes up as quickly as we can. So, we need to work better to do we need to do better financial forecasting. And so some of that is also based upon what's going on in the world, right? And so we have to think about more than just one set of variables on those financial forecasts as we move forward to be prepared for whatever comes, but we also have to do a better job of being more realistic. So not being critical of anybody, but if you go back and look at our capital spends, right? Our eyes are always bigger than our stomach. We've got to work to figure out not only what we want to do and need to do, but what do we have the capacity to do. And we are also going to have to, and this is more David's area, but the same thing with employee shortages, right? We have a lot of people that can retire. They've earned that right. We don't want them all walking out the door the same day. How are we going to backfill all those positions as the workforce gets tighter and tighter and there's fewer and fewer people there? So,
Ted, I want to, for 1 second, interrupt. Can you go to slide 41? I think the capital plan is an important piece because your point here, we have sometimes celebrated the fact that we underspend our capital plan, and we have used the savings, I think, to pay down debt, which was a helpful strategy to pay down debt.
but I would like to be very transparent about that. If we know we're not going to spend this much money in capital, let's just go ahead and factor in paying down that debt with that extra money. I mean, let's just not make it appear as if it was a coincidence that happened. If that's our plan, let's show it as our plan and follow it as our plan. So, can you go a couple more slides?
One more.
Yeah, so there's our debt. So I'm not sure. Like Jay, so I've been here 2.5 months. So every day things come into focus a little bit better for me. I'm learning every day, but everything's not crystal clear for me yet. So I'm still steeply in that learning curve. So I don't know what happened 2 years ago to get the debt level where it is, and it really doesn't matter. But the plan was to pay it down. And we have, and we wanted to get where we were in line with our peers on our debt, and we have. And so I don't think that needs to be such a big focus for us. We don't want it to get back to where it was, right? We don't want to just lose all touch with it, but also that's not going to be the most important thing. I'm going to come to this board every meeting and say, we got to pay our debt down this much more. We got to pay our debt down. We've done a good job with that, but things have changed. So what we're going to keep our finger on are going to change. And so that's really where I wanted to talk about with our sound financial decisions is to be more adaptable, to be able to change more quickly. And then, if we do have sound financial decisions, and that's going to lead over to reasonable rates, right? I mean, so there's a few other ways we can get some grants, we can earn some interest, we can do a few other things, but at the end of the day, almost all the money comes from the ratepayers, right? And so whatever we spend, they're going to be the one that's going to have to pay for it. So having those good financial decisions will help to meet the reasonable rates. And then
One thing you do have is you have, I might be wrong here, but $500 or $600 a year going to be spending on capital for quite a long time. Your debt, don't talk about the off balance sheet debt, but your real debt's 2.7 billion. And how much of that capital plan can you finance?
and
That's something I just needs to be thought through.
exactly. And also how much of that can we do in any one given year, right? So why should I go borrow $700 million when we only spend $400 million, right? Because I'm just paying interest on money,
But part of that money can be paid for in cash flow. And
Exactly. And how do we figure out that mix, right? How do we figure out the right mix to pay with cash and to borrow, and then what other programs can we use besides the traditional borrowing methods that we use, like WIFIA, where and should we sculpt that debt a little bit different instead of just having it a straight amortization over 20, 30 years. As we see big debt rolling off in the future, we have a little bit less debt on the front end, a little bit more debt on the back end. But we also don't want to get into a situation where we kind of have the balloon payment on a jumbo mortgage kind of deal. But I think we don't want to sit down and say, this is what we're going to do over the next 2 years, because I don't know what the interest rate climate's going to do. So we have to have multiple approaches on our bench. And when we see the environment that as we get closer, we know which one to pull from.
But I think that you're right. We have to balance. When we're saying we're not in the same place that we were in 2010, that's on this chart. But we've been operating as if we were in the same place. That's really the message. We're gonna pivot to make the right decisions on how we fund things and have discussions about what we're funding them, what are being funded. So when Renetta talks about the integrated resource plan, and when she talks about all of the capital type projects that are moving forward, we have to be better, more transparent about what we're doing. So if we have our current capital plan for this fiscal year, do you know the number is 400 million, 500 million?
The current number is about, taking everything about 600,
600 million. How much do you think we're going to get done this year?
about 400.
So we brought to the board a $600 million capital plan that we're going to pay most of, if not all, in cash. And we're only going to get 200 million. We'll have 200 million free that our strategy has been for 10 years to pay down debt with. What we're suggesting is simply that we're going to be way more transparent about what our planning is. We're going to get you a number. And if we're going to spend $200 million to pay down debt, we're going to tell you up front on the front end. And we're going to execute. Strategy development is the easy part. The execution is the harder part. And we're going to be more clear about that and have all the options on the table. Renetta didn't want to answer either one of those two questions that I just asked her.
Well, and Ted nailed it. It's also being more transparent in the budgeting process. And Jay, you and I have talked about that I think our budget conversations in the Finance and Audit Committee will be very different this year than they have been in the past, to your point.
And we have a team of people. This is one of the first things that Ted came back to me with when he started looking at the planning and the budgeting group, that are ready to do all of those things. The tools are in place to be really, really very good at what we do. We can forecast better, we can budget better, we can plan better, and they are a fantastic team. And we are going to teach broader than that one team. It's not, they get the title financial planning and budgeting. It is everybody's job and role to be a part of that. And it doesn't drive the business needs, because in the end, we have to supply the utilities to our customers. We have to be ready for the electric vehicles, for the growth. We have to be able to respond to the needs of our community. And the budget planning will make us be able to do that really well.
Jay, from a rating agency point of view, are we really not the same as we were 10 years ago? It is the Vogtle, if you put the Vogtle debt on top of what we've got.
From the way the rating agencies are going to think about it, that some of those percentages, but we have to operate our business the way that, so we have an accounting standard that we follow. We have a rating agency standard that we follow. And in the end, we need to be sure that we're taking all of that into account to make the sound business decisions that it then affect our customers, because in the end, they have to pay the debt. Part of our question now, long term, this is not what we talked about in the Vogtle update, but we have a 20-year agreement with Vogtle. That's 208 megawatts. We have a 30-year integrated resource plan. So on the surface, it looks like we might be able to save a lot of money in 20 years. Except we need 208 megawatts of non-carbon emitting resources that's going to be positive for us. And so all of that is in play. But yes.
The one thing, John, I might be wrong here, guys. Y'all know this, but I think our assets are close to 11 billion, and your Vogtle off balance sheet and your existing debt's like 5.8 billion. So you're still got a strong balance sheet.
Even with that on there.
Yeah, even with that on there. And I just, the only thing I'd say with interest rates is it's kind of like gas prices. They've been pretty, we're in the producing of water and sewer and electrons. We're not in the interest rate risk business, and interest rates have never been historically, the last 10 years, they've been incredibly low rates. And to think that you're going to have this capital program, whether you spend some or not, I'd fix as much as you can today. You might miss the bottom.
Right.
But if it gets away from you, and I don't know if you can get collars or whatever, but
yeah,
I would focus on trying to protect, if they did shoot up.
yeah. So that's exactly what I was talking about. Not just have a hammer is not our only tool, right? We want to have a full toolbox, and so that and have those tools out all the time. So
when we know, when it calls for a hammer, we grab the hammer. When it calls for a wrench, we grab a wrench. And so, you know, now that makes it a little bit harder for us, right? So it's easier for just to come with, here's the approach we're taking, right? And we're going to just keep going down this road, rather than say, we're ready to go down any of these 5 roads, depending on what happens. And if we start going down this road, and we may need to cross over and then they're going to start down this road, but we have to have that flexibility in place to make those changes. And you know, I think our hedging policy is a perfect example. I mean, when I came and said, you know, we like to hedge 50% of our gas purchases. Okay. You know, there wasn't much more context to it than that. You know, once we got 50% hedged, then we were done. It didn't matter what was going on out in the world, right? So you know, we pushed and made some changes to that. And with rates being very, very flat, maybe 50% was the right answer. And when they did this and they did it fast, we needed to be ready. We should have seen it coming sooner than we did.
Well, and I mean, we're a policy-making board, and I think that we have given you the ability within our policies to time to react and be nimble when you see those things happen. So to the extent if you see things that we're handcuffing your ability to be nimble, then, you know, we need to know that. I think we're much better than we were the last time we were here, where we actually were approving hedges back in the day, Bobby, which by the time you came to us to approve the hedge, the benefit had
The window closed, right?
So I just want to make sure that we're doing what we need to be doing for you.
We do. That is not a problem.
Okay.
We are able to be as nimble as we need to be, and we just have to be better at doing it. If you go back to slide 35, it is part of this feeds within the things that Renetta and others are going to talk about, and it also in a little while we'll have under customer loyalty a discussion about ease of doing business. We talk about it mainly with customers, but the policies and procedures that you all adopt allow us to be nimble and make it easier for us to do business. And so we just have to take advantage of and use the guardrails that you've put for us to do that.
Now, collars are really expensive right now, so just warning you on that.
Right. We have
Really?
to weigh all those factors, right?
Very expensive. That got me nervous.
So yeah, we're not planning on,
Saying what the instrument is, I'm just
we
saying.
need to use them all.
We need to be on top of our game.
Yep.
Yeah. That's a perfect, be on top of the game. Yeah. And then just quickly, I won't, so technology. So anything that we're going to do is going to have a technology aspect to it, right? I mean, you know, everything goes back to technology. You know, when I started in this industry and had hair, that wasn't always the case, but it is now. So we have to have the right resources to have support for technology, and then, you know, layered into that, and we can have another long discussion if you'd like about cybersecurity. But we have
That's actually, I think page 43 is cyber security.
Yeah.
Because the technology piece of this, sorry, I just jumped in and interrupted. I think is an important piece. You all have been very interested in this, and we're going to keep it on the front of our radar.
The only thing I'd add on technology is as much money has been wasted in technology has been, you know, so I think technology is damn important. And, you know, the key thing is keeping the plumbing going.
Right.
But a lot of money been wasted. And things are changing quickly, and I just make sure you have to have where we want to go category, because I just make sure you're very thoughtful on when you spend and how you spend.
Thank you.
Ted, how would you rate our technology here?
So when you say rate,
We, an A or an F? Obviously somewhere in between.
I think in certain areas, if we're not an A, we're close to it. But in certain areas, we probably are a C, getting close to a D. And so I've got Brad here with me, and so we have a CIO position, and the reason for that is that we understand how important technology is, and to focus on that. So some of the things that he's working on is so I think we need to do some reorganization. I think we have some really good seasoned people, but we've built our organization a little bit around the people and their skill sets instead of maybe the way that the organization needs to flow. And so we're looking at making some possible, well, not possible, but there'll be some changes in how that group is reorganized, so it aligns better with the organization than with the staff. One of the things that I was very impressed with when I first came here is that there are people in David's group that are planted into the business group so that they have a resource, a human resources person that they can go to on their team that is really a part of their team. We want to figure out a way to mimic that with technology services too, so that maybe that person is not the person that can give you the answer to every question, but they are the link back into human resources in David's example, and technology services in Brad's, where they can be that person that can go back into technology services and find the right person to pull in to help do that. So I think Chair Baker, one of the things I think we can do better is with our project management aspect as well. And so we're looking at all that. And Brad, is there anything you'd like to add? I mean,
No, I think you hit on it well. Very impressed with seeing it top notch. I think that there's some opportunities to improve our alignment with this in terms of meeting the needs of what the business needs. Also as well, ensuring that we execute it in a proper fashion, tweaking our project management methodologies to make sure that we don't have runaway project costs, and being stewards of those money, being cautious of the money. And doing fewer things really, really well versus a lot of things kind of mediocre. So focusing on the big initiatives that are the big wins for the organization.
We are, I'm going to move us to Renetta, but to your specific question, we've got to move the decisions on technology to the general direction can come from a senior level. But we have made decisions over the last 8 or 10 years where we have decided, for example, we needed to go from 12 to 6 platforms without regard to whether it actually supported our customers, our employees, and our staff and our team, including putting out work order systems that have not met the needs of the staff that are using them on a daily basis. We have decisions that were made to move forward with some customer engagement and platforms and customer service, and that is delayed and over budget. I mean, we've got to get tighter and better at those things. So safety, security, cybersecurity, compliance, SCADA systems, GIS systems, really pretty good. Some of the core foundational things we need to get much better at. No grades, but much better. So Ray, if you want to jump into some of the rest of the business excellence.
Be glad to. Good morning. So I'm going to focus on the two areas there called Integrated Resource Plan, which Jay kind of talked about a little bit, as well as Resilient and Reliable JEA. Now, while they are just unique to this area, they also touch on, as well as some beautiful team. You're going to hear something you probably don't hear often. You're going to hear an operations person talking about human resources. I know a little bit to be dangerous talking about finance, and no, you're not stepping on my toes at all. You're broadening the perspective. Very much appreciated. So, integrated resource plans, kind of like Jay said, that is it. Let me say this: it's good to be back at JEA. It's a very pivotal time to be back at JEA, and we're doing some foundational cornerstone projects, policies, programs that are going to set us into the future. Integrated resource plans are one of those. There are two integrated plans. The board has seen before the integrated water resources plan that was recently completed last year. And so what these plans do is set us to the future, how we're going to meet the electric and water needs of our customers 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out. So they're very, very, very important. On the integrated water resource plan, just going very high level, you're talking about water supply. So you're talking about going out into the future. You know, what does our portfolio look like as far as aquifer, brackish groundwater, purified water, all of that. And so set that plan out. That plan was accelerated due to Senate Bill 6064, but most of the plan is on track. And so there's a capital component that's going to need to be implemented in order to support that plan. So that is under as far as the execution is concerned. Integrated resource plan for electric, it's just started. Last couple of months that got underway. Same thing as we're doing, setting out the next generation, 10 years out, 20 years out, 30 years out. Our generation is going to look like. What is our grid going to look like? How is electrification, vehicles, how is that going to be taken under consideration? There's going to be scenarios that are going to be out there. We have experts to help us develop these scenarios. You know, what is the future going to look like? It's a plan at best. We're going to use the best available data to set up scenarios as we go forth. So this is very critical for us. And the underpinnings of whatever scenarios that are developed, it's going to have to be reliable. It's going to have to be sustainable when it comes to the environment. It needs to be cost effective as well. Those are the three things, and that transcends whether you're talking about electric or water. That's it. Now, one of the things that we are going to do, which I think is very, very critical when we do the IRP for electric, is going to have a very robust stakeholder engagement. Transparent process. We're going to bring our customers in, stakeholders. It's going to represent environmental community. It's going to represent some of our large customers, economic development, and quite frankly, underserved communities, those that are strapped as far as finances are concerned. We want to make sure that the input that we get is a good balance as we set this forward. You can hear me? So that is what is happening with the integrated resource plan for electric. So underway with that, and we're anticipated for that to be completed by the end of next year. And I'm gonna take a pause or a breath in case anyone has any questions. Right. So next, resiliency and reliability. So in the past, when you're talking about resiliency and reliability, you're really talking about, we have talked about how resilient and how reliable is our infrastructure when it comes to severe weather. Saw like the previous presentation in Florida, that means hurricanes or has historically meant hurricanes. Now we're expanding on that. It could be other types of severe weather. So how resilient and reliable. And we've done a pretty good job here at JEA with emergency planning. We have our plans that are in place. We've done a pretty good job when it comes to asset management, preventative maintenance. All of these are tools in the toolbox. But as you look at as you look at years out, your 100-year storm is maybe now your 50-year storm, maybe your 25-year storm, and where our assets are located, how do we best protect those? How do we best protect those? So we did a resiliency study, which is more, I'll say, a flooding study for our water assets. Now we're going to expand on that to include our electric assets. Because last time I looked, you have a lift station, you got a substation, they're located, you're gonna have the same weather that's gonna impact them. So we're gonna expand upon that. So that takes care of, I'll call it the pipes, the pumps, the plants. But in order to operate those, you need human resources, you need technology, you have to have the financial resources to do that. Otherwise, they don't operate. So when we talk about resiliency and reliability, it's not just about the things, the infrastructure. We're talking about JEA. So how do we have the human resources that are going to be in place? How are we going to have the skills, the technology, the people? A good, diverse mixture of people, skills, and all the rest of that. That's where retention comes into place, recruitment comes to in place. You've heard about, a good deal of our population can retire. Knowledge transfer, that's all part of resiliency and reliability. So David is going to handle all of that for us.
That's actually, I think, incredibly important point. This slide in July, when we were going to do this, said resilient and reliable infrastructure. And I would have expected a chief operating officer to be all on board with that. And she said, that's not the right terminology and the right word. We need to change this. It's broader than the infrastructure. It is a resilient and reliable JEA. The entire organization needs to be, the words that we use matter and are important. And so that is the thought that we're bringing to the table, is that some of these slides have changed since July, whenever we had the conversations, because we've been moving forward with the strategy, with the transition to execution. So I appreciate that the team is willing to adjust and make adjustments as we move forward.
Thank you, Jay.
I have one question. We talk about the storms and, all the things that we're used to. But how does our grid compare to what happened in Texas? And if we get one of these crazy freezes and so forth, are we any different than what happened in Texas? Are we better prepared or less prepared?
Excellent question. Those are some of the things that we're going to be looking at in this resiliency, reliability study that we're going to be doing for electric. Now, why we don't have the same weather impacts that Texas did, what happened in Texas affects us as well, or can affect us as well.
It happened in Texas way back when is still affecting us in the construction. We can't get paint today because the chemical plants are still down.
That's a deregulated, Texas deregulated utility market, which part of the problem.
Right. Some of the difference would be the way that we buy and transact our business on natural gas and on electric. So it puts us in a slightly better place. But this work on resiliency and reliability came out of the cold weather in Texas. Okay. We realize that Houston and Jacksonville are the same potential weather. In 1985, we had 7-degree weather. And so it can become an impact to our system. The Texas problem is reported to be an electric issue. It was a water crisis. Public systems from San Antonio to Memphis, any significant system, and many of the smaller systems were in boil water alerts for days. And so we have to be prepared for that type of an event. But as we started looking at what are we ready for, cold weather, we're better because it's a different market. We are in better shape. But a 7-degree or extended period of cold weather would stress our system dramatically. It would be hard. It would be expensive.
For 1985.
Yeah. And so that's the reason we're having to look at all of these things more broadly. And we've got a team that are kind of studying.
Chief, wasn't it an unregulated market that caused it?
Yes, the unregulated market does have a pretty significant impact, but then there's cold weather that comes through how we get natural gas, which is our biggest supply, how we get that into the peninsula that we have live on, and how we get electricity that's constrained by transmission could cause some similar activities. We won't have the same type of market risk because it's a different market. But we have other types of risk that are associated with it. We have to be prepared for it. That's our it is a big concern, and we're trying to be as prepared as we can be for it by having physical delivery of gas, by having transportation of gas firm so that we have as much as we can to be ahead of it.
Thank you, Jay. And one last thing for resiliency, under the resiliency and reliability umbrella, it's going to give us another opportunity to look at our current policy, current ordinance when it comes to overhead to underground. We'll take a look at that and see if that should be updated, what other kind of nuances, things such as that.
That's a different, that one's actually, I don't want to skip over that. Overhead to underground has historically been an aesthetics issue. And we are working, we will keep the program in place just like we have now for overhead to underground for subdivisions that are interested in going from overhead to underground. But there's a lot of places that it might be able to help our reliability and resiliency. And so we're tweaking the way we think about it to understand what type of long-term plan. And this may be this isn't the next 2 or 3 or 4 years. This is a 20, 30, 40, 50-year plan on where we can take advantage of places that need to be transitioned. So it's no longer aesthetics. It can be aesthetics and reliability and resiliency. And I think we'll move on over to, I think Laura Dutton is going to cover new business opportunities.
Thank you. It kind of feels actually like a perfect segue from resiliency. Some of the new business opportunities that have been put on the table in the past are potential future opportunities. There's a couple we think are worth focusing on in the near term. You heard earlier from Mr. Geller about the municipal broadband. Fiber, it turns out we already have an existing network, excuse me, and we use it for operations. And being able to do some grid modernization work to our fiber network actually could help us with resiliency. In addition to the things that it can do for us, for our grid itself. There's some things like maintenance costs that keep going up and scalability and future use cases. So thinking about like wireless even beyond the fiber network. Those are things that we currently have a study underway to explore doing. Should we go beyond the grid, our grid itself? Should we go beyond utility use? Maybe. First, we want to look at a market study. And when I say market study, that a lot of times means for people profitability. That's not why we're interested. It's really for the purposes of serving our customers in the best way we can. We think grid modernization will absolutely do that. And if we look at the market and determine that there is an option, an opportunity to better serve our customers through fiber, then we're going to continue down the path. And that looks like next for us, looking at the potential obstacles that are there, some of our limitations from our charter, and then a whole range of business model options that exist for fiber. So it is a little bit of a marathon to get to the spot where we would know the answer of whether or not that's an opportunity we want to go all the way on. And the answer may very well be no, but we'll do the market analysis and come back and talk with you all about it. The other area for new business opportunities is district energy systems. And at JEA, we think about that only as chilled water service. And it is chilled water service. In fact, we like to expand that primarily in the downtown area where a lot of development is currently underway. We've got some customers that are interested in taking on our chilled water service. And what we need to do at the same time we're talking to them is make sure that our system itself can take on that capacity. So already built into our capital plan is some additional chilling equipment and cooling tower equipment to help us be positioned to serve the capacity for the customers that are interested in it. In addition to chilled water, we think there is potentially a model for district energy systems where we could serve solar and distributed generation to the customers that are interested in that as a resource. There may be the opportunity that as the integrated resource plan comes into the final stages, we might be better positioned to understand what our capabilities might look like for solar and distributed generation through a model that's similar. So those are the two key new business opportunities for us. I'll also pause and see if you all have questions or thoughts or comments.
What's happened to natural gas as a new business opportunity?
Natural gas had been, I should have paused and let Jay take this. Natural gas had been part of a discussion several years back. I don't know that it's completely off the table, Chair Baker, but it is, we're not in a position to suggest that that's an opportunity we're focused on at the moment.
I want to understand the size and scope and relationship, and there's the franchise that TECO People's Gas has, and we're studying that. We're meeting them in the next month or so, and we'll continue having discussions about how we can partner appropriately. And so it could turn into something that could come back. The natural gas,
Residential natural gas.
and the natural gas system in Jacksonville is smaller than I thought it was when we started the process. Is not. We are the largest customer by several fold already of that. And so if it's something that benefits our customers, then we can kind of put that on the table. It's a smaller piece of what we think we could do compared to serving our existing customers with distributed generation and a district energy model, or with fiber. Still out there, still have discussions. As Ted said, we'll have options in our road to potentially move forward with that.
Jay, is there opportunities in transmission?
There could. So we own, we jointly own some transmission lines already, and we have some customers that we have transport capabilities, and we sell natural gas through transport to some customers. And if that might be something we could expand. And in the past, we've had discussions on whether we should take over and own some of the transmission outright and not jointly own that. And that several years ago didn't go very far with that discussion. We're going to re-engage with TECO and see where that should go. We've met with several customers that are already, a couple of sites with one customer that are already kind of working on how their distributed system might work. And whether we are part of the ownership of the natural gas system or whether we're partnering with them, we think we can serve our customers pretty well with some distributed gas generation in addition to solar. And so.
And on the new business development or business opportunities, I know we're reaching out to the underserved community, and I was pleased, we're not necessarily talking about just profitability, but if we're focusing also on impact, we can make a great deal of impact in those underserved communities, leveraging technology and leveraging some of these new business opportunities. So thank you for that recognition.
To add what Marty's saying, if Jacksonville grows, JEA grows, and vice versa. I mean, or what's your thoughts on, being part of the economic development community? How can we engage there?
I think there are, it actually flows right through, Bobby, with what we were planning to cover on economic development. We tend to think of that traditionally as an incentive program. And we've had quite a bit of conversation that actually, to better serve our customers, we think there's some ways we can improve lives beyond the traditional. Being more proactive about not just the programs that we design, but do we have real estate that is viable for economic development? We want to go through a process of taking inventory of that and looking to see, we have some surplus inventory, what should we do with it? And if it works for economic development, partner with the right folks, Jax USA, the Downtown Investment Authority, other groups that can help us, give us some input and help us make a better decision with what to do with real estate, with what to do with things like street lighting. That normally isn't thought about as something for economic development, but it turns out people that come to Jacksonville also want to be able to enjoy the quality of their life beyond the work hours. And so we're looking at going beyond the traditional program design and thinking about ways that we can make Jacksonville the place that people want to come, downtown the place that people want to live, work, and play. So there's really a stronger focus, Bobby, on strengthening partnerships. We do have some work to do with program design, and it has to go beyond just rates. We have to think about sustainability goals that companies might have when they are looking and making the decision on where they want to be long term. And I'm talking about new companies at the moment, but we also need to pay attention to companies that are already here. What do we do for expansion and retention of companies? If they decide to change a shift to the Jacksonville area, that adds jobs and capital investment to our world. So those are the areas we're really thinking of focusing on. And we really want to be stronger partners for the local economic development organizations.
But it is the thing that you have said to us regularly, that if Jacksonville grows, JEA grows, if the community prospers and we can be part of that, then I think that is, that's really our target and our goal with this. It leads into parts of what we have to do, which is to be easier to do business with, and how we not only deal with that. I think Laura brings up a good point. There's this handoff, and Sheila and I have been talking about how do we get the existing customer relationship with our existing customers to be part of economic development, and how do we make everything kind of easier to do business with? And Sheila, if you want to kind of jump off into that discussion.
This portion of the discussion is perfectly placed after our discussion about the financials and our discussion about the integrated resource plan, positioning ourselves to serve the community for years to come. We are the 12th largest city in the United States, the 12th largest city in the United States, and we continue to grow. One of the biggest challenges for customer experience for utilities is generational. One that assumes that the preferences of the younger generation matches the preferences of older generations, and they simply do not. Utilities provide a service that is singular, with the expectation that everyone will be served the same way, and customers don't want to be served the same way. We have the tools to build an experience that earns customer loyalty, that provides choice and opportunity for customers to align their expenses to their household budgets. We talked about an integrated resource plan, and what that means is we'll be able to provide different rate options for customers. We'll be able to provide different billing options for customers, again, to align those expenses to their household budgets. We will also harness the data of nearly 500,000 smart meters to give customers a window into how that energy is consumed, that energy and water is consumed, so that when that bill arrives at the end of the month, they have an understanding of what that bill amount means. But not just at the end of the month, Mr. Morales, throughout the billing period. So there are no surprises. The adoption rate of smart devices is up at about 36% now. We are the utility company. We should help our customers to optimize the use of all of those smart devices and be the trusted advisor for information about how best to use the energy and the water. Our business customers rely on us to be more than just a source of information. They want us to be a partner and help them to make informed energy management decisions. Again, providing that information at a level that makes sense to our businesses will help to build that customer loyalty and make it easy for them to do business with us. I read an article that said that the expectations of utility customers of their utilities is very low. And anything that we can do above and beyond that will earn customer loyalty, will help to engage the customers more closely with the utility. But I don't know that I agree with the article because I believe our customers are looking at Amazon and they're looking at all of these other experiences and expecting their experience with the utility to match that. And what's the difference? That it's simple, it's easy, and uncomplicated. So our primary strategy for the near term is to make the experience simple, easy, and less complicated, and ultimately make it easier for them to do business with us. Factoring in all these things, technology, rates structure, new enhanced information that's at their fingertips. That will help to build the customer experience that we hope to deliver for years to come.
Sad that the bar is set. A great opportunity though, too, isn't it?
Yes.
It's a transition industry. The bar is, we set the bar, we JEA, we, the utility business, set the bar low a long time ago on our relationship with our customers. And that's what Sheila's talking about is if all we're doing is trying to clear that bar, it's not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's a perfect segue into JEA brand management. And Eric, if you would go to slide 61. So I'm in my 8th week. And just as Ted said, every day there are many new learnings and things come into sharper focus. But what I know already is the wonderful strength of the JEA brand in Northeast Florida. And I also know that we are equipped with the tools that we need, including a fantastic, dedicated communications and media relations team. They all care deeply for JEA and they are infused with the love for our customers that Sheila and her teams reflect. So, how do we weave a story from all the elements that we talked about today and share that story consistently, often, and in a very approachable manner with our customers? That is our constant work. We do a great job of listening, but we have to improve that and listen even more closely and pay attention, as has been noted many times this morning, to who are our new residents, who are getting to know us the first time. How do we maintain the right level of communication and attention to their needs? We have some core principles and themes that we always reflect in our communications, and these will always be part of our brand. Eric, if you'll go to slide 62. We have to continue to build customer trust, deepen our community engagement, and have proactive and honest relationships with our media. So we'll come back to you several times this year and in the coming year to talk about customer segmentation, surveys, and additional platforms where we need to go out and meet our customer. It's also important, I think, to reflect, as you all have reflected this morning, we have to tell them about the opportunities. We also have to tell them about the challenges that we face. That's a big part of how we continue to maintain trust. I'm happy to take any questions about our communications and our brand management approach.
Where are you on staffing? Are you hired everybody you need to hire?
We have a VP of communications search that is active right now. And I will hope at our January board meeting to have a really solid update and maybe even a person to introduce. Thank you.
We, I think that was, you were talking about communications and more narrowly, but the transition over the next several years is going to be even bigger and broader than that, because the growth that we're having and the IRP work that we're doing and the work that we're needing to catch up on and do on water and wastewater in particular, I think we're going to see substantial staffing increases in the next number of years in order to be able to complete and manage the things that we just need to do. And then much of what we're talking about on raising the bar is going to require a different mindset and more people to be able to do that. So it's a ongoing issue that we've got to deal with on the people side of the business. Can you skip back to page 33 real quick? Because I think one of the issues that I want to be sure that you understand when we're talking about the strategy and the topics, this is the board calendar. We'll still tweak some of this, but each meeting, and we're now at 8 meetings for a year, we will have key and critical strategic issues that will be on the agenda. And so each of the leadership team will have opportunities and times where we're going to talk about the people, and we're going to talk about the administrative issues and the operations issues and the finance issues. We're going to talk about communication and external affairs. We're going to talk about our customers, all of it wrapped around the strategy and how we're going to move forward with these key topics, and try to keep it in front of you each meeting so that there's always a strategic topic and a strategic issue that we're covering from all of the different topics. I mean, what I hope that one of the things I hope you get is how broad the challenge is for us and how broad the activities that we're involved in and the types of challenges that we have that our team is ready to kind of step off and tackle. There's more detail to come on each one of these topics. We weren't creating a book whenever we started this process. We've got these objectives, and we're going to come back to you with ever improving projects and processes. And I appreciate the support that you all have given us. And as you pointed out, the flexibility for us to be able to operate where we need to, with the appropriate guardrails in place to help us to make good decisions. So we will answer any questions that you have in the next 12 minutes.
Laura, we've come from a period at JEA where the question was asked, why should I care whether it's Florida Power and Light or JEA brings me power as long as my lights work? And I think we do a lot of our PR beats around the bush of that question. And I think we owe it to our citizens to clearly explain to them why it's important that we have a city-owned utility.
Absolutely. That is a fundamental principle in our communications across all platforms and in all venues. The hometown customer-owned advantage is something that we can and should break down into tangibles for people, especially as we have the new influx of citizens. We have to explain to people with a very short attention span people are pressed for time, we have to tell them about the benefit of forums like this, the close in detailed accounting out on the public internet that they get of how their utility is governed and how the 2,000 people are accountable to them, work for them. So we can turn up the volume on those messages.
Should. If it wasn't for the fact that people didn't trust people that were going to get the money, we'd be gone.
Sir.
We've got to tell the story better.
We have an excellent story to tell. We have a odd period of time that people are still talking about, that we've all made it through and that you all help support us to take us through. There are other parts of the country, other utilities right now that are in similar situations to where we were over the last couple of years. And so it's a message that we need to share, because Sheila pointed out 12th largest city, 8th largest electric system, one of the largest water and wastewater systems in the Southeast, at least, if not the whole country. All combined makes us one of the largest and most influential and important utilities, municipally owned, not-for-profit utilities in the country. So we owe it much more broadly than just to our customers. We owe it to the industry to help set the bar higher for everybody. I appreciate you bringing it up, because I think it is. We are not always as good at patting ourselves on the back as we need to be. And so we'll balance that. It won't be about shouting how good we are. It'll be about how we support the community. And that sometimes is not even the utilities we provide. We had volunteers out in the community last weekend helping support the community. We have volunteers and ambassadors out speaking to groups every single day. It's not a message that just comes from a single person or even the 8 members of the leadership team. It's a message that the customers see every day with the pride that our employees have for what they do to serve the community. I've gotten notes back that people are proud to wear their JEA logos again, and that makes me very happy because of the team that we've put together to help lead us through this. So we will be sure to continue to message that even louder and more clearly. Unless there's other questions, that's all that we had for them.
I just got one comment. One, this has been a great session, and I'm very impressed with the agility and out-of-box thinking that all your senior leadership team is doing. And I think the key takeaway for me is just this approach is not going to be in silos. The crosstalk right now, and everybody's saying they need to be talking to each other, because there's going to be objectives that are going to be transcend either the strategy person, the finance person, whatever. And that's hard as hell to do too. And it's easy to get trapped in the silo thing. But I think it's great that the approach has been, everybody has a role in this. All the departments have a role in the objectives, and getting that synergy is going to be key on it. And then lastly, not to get overly subjective, but just the ethical core value umbrella over all this, just to keep you out of those ethical minefields, which happens when you take your eye off the ball. It's going to be important. Jay, I think it's great that you continually emphasize that. And I think your whole senior leadership team is embracing that, and that's going to be very important. But this is a great session.
The good news is that when we first started rolling this out and discussing these strategies with our employees, the values that we put out, on one of our meetings with a group, one of our team said something along the lines of, we can all accomplish the goals and the targets without the values. We could do the things that need to be done, deliver utilities, and you've seen that happen before. That's the reason that we keep talking about these values, is because if we lose track of that, then bad things start to happen, whether it's safety, respect, or integrity. And so I appreciate very much that you all drive that home to us every time we meet. that we make sure that we're doing things the right way, because it's important that it's really important that we do it, that we just do it the right way.
Okay, if there's nothing further to come before this meeting, we're adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.